Hey everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is The House That Watches You Sleep. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The living room smelled faintly of wet dog and reheated lasagna, a combination that usually made Marcy wrinkle her nose, but somehow felt tolerable tonight. She was kneeling by the sofa, untangling the cord of a broken lamp, muttering to herself. "How do people make this look easy?" she said, not waiting for an answer. Across the room, the hum of the refrigerator was punctuated by a sharp ping from the toaster oven. Dean, 32, male, Marcy's boyfriend, leaned against the counter with his arms crossed. His dark hair was messy from running a hand through it for the 5th time that evening, the kind of restless gesture that only made her more aware of the silence stretching between them. He scratched at a stubborn patch of stubble on his jaw. "You know, I could call an electrician," he said. The words hung in the air like a question. "You could," Marcy said, finally freeing the lamp cord. She stood and plugged it in. The lamp blinked once, hesitated, then went dark again. "Or we could live with semi-functioning lighting until the weekend. Your choice." Dean grunted, clearly deciding she'd won. He headed for the sofa, kicking off his shoes. "You ever notice how quiet this street gets after 10? He asked, half to her and half to himself. Outside, the low hum of traffic had dimmed to occasional tires over a manhole cover, distant enough to be barely audible, but enough to make Marcy pause. "I notice everything," she said, smirking, but not really joking. Marcy, 28, female, had always had an eye for detail, the kind that made her coworkers in the publishing office nervous when she leaned over their shoulders at the wrong moment. She could spot a missing comma or a crack in a sidewalk from across the block. Tonight, her detail radar was tingling. Dean followed her gaze toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but the streetlights pooled on the sidewalk in broken rectangles. A shadow moved, or maybe it hadn't. Marcy tilted her head. A neighbor, probably, too far to see clearly. Still, her stomach tightened. "You okay?" Dean asked. He noticed the slight crease in her forehead. "Yeah," she said, brushing it off, but she didn't look away from the window. A sudden, thin scrape came from the side of the house. Metal on stone. Marcy jumped. Dean turned sharply toward the sound, squinting through the dim light. "Probably the gutter," he said. "Wind." "Wind," Marcy repeated, her voice tight, like she didn't believe it. Dean laughed, short, trying to shake it off. "I think you're imagining things." He walked to the window and pressed a hand against the glass. "Nothing, you're fine." Marcy nodded, but didn't take her eyes off the edge of the driveway. Something about the angle felt wrong. The house had been theirs for just over a month. A small 2-story on the edge of a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Portland. Enough to be comfortable, but new enough to still hold a few surprises or hidden problems? Want me to make some tea? Dean asked, returning to the kitchen. Sure, she said, her voice lower now. The scrape had been gone for seconds, but the tension in her shoulders didn't leave. Dean shuffled to the cupboard, pulling out a mug and the box of tea bags. The kettle clicked on, and a whiff of boiling water mingled with the faint, musty scent from the basement. Marcy noticed it more than usual, like it had grown stronger in the last hour, though Dean said nothing. You think we should check the basement door? She asked casually, tilting her head toward the narrow staircase. Dean froze mid-reach. For what? For you know anything. Her tone was deliberately casual. Dean ran a hand through his hair again, slower this time, and exhaled. Marcy, we just moved in. If something's up, we'll see it. Don't start thinking we're living in a horror movie. Marcy turned away, letting her fingers brush the banister absent-mindedly. Yeah, horror movies, she murmured, not believing herself. Her pulse had picked up the scrape, the shadow, the smell. It was just enough to make her imagine possibilities, the kind that might seem crazy to anyone else. She sat down on the sofa. Dean handed her a mug of tea, and for a minute, they sipped in silence. The kettle clicked off behind them, leaving the faint, steady hum of the refrigerator. Marcy watched the steam curl upward, thinking about the small inconsistencies. A scratch where there shouldn't be. A window that rattled slightly when there was no wind. All little things. Probably nothing. Still, the thought wouldn't leave her. Something about the house felt observant. Not alive, not sentient. Just aware, like it had seen things happen here before, and now it was studying them. Dean's phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it, an alert from a news app. Power outage reported a few blocks away, he said. Probably why the lamp's glitching. Marcy nodded, but the relief was fleeting. She hugged the mug to her chest, feeling its warmth against her palms. Right, she said, voice small. That makes sense. Dean leaned back on the sofa, stretching his legs out. We could go to bed early, he said. Start fresh tomorrow. Big day at work for both of us. Marcy followed his gaze toward the bedroom door, and something about the dim light spilling across the carpet made her stomach clench again. She considered the basement, the lamp, the scratch on the siding, the shadow in the driveway. And then she considered sleep. Maybe we should just check the locks, she said finally. Before bed, just to be sure. Dean glanced at her, then toward the front door, weighing the small suggestion. It wasn't panic, just caution. He nodded. Okay, he said. 5 minutes, then bed. Marcy's fingers grazed the door handle as the house seemed to settle around them. The quiet was full of small noises. The kettle cooling, the refrigerator cycling on, the distant wheels of a car on wet asphalt. She took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the tea soothe her. But there was an unmistakable tension threading through her limbs, a small, undeniable fray at the edge of calm. And then, without warning, the front porch light flickered. Marcy fumbled with the front door lock, twisting the key once, twice. The brass felt cold under her fingers, colder than usual, and for a moment she thought she heard something scrape against the siding again. "Dean," she whispered, not wanting to raise her voice, "something's off outside." Dean appeared behind her, leaning in close, his hand brushing hers. "It's probably the wind," he said, though the note of uncertainty in his own voice betrayed him. He squinted through the frosted glass. Nothing out there, but Marcy's instincts prickled, sharper now. She hated being wrong, hated letting fear make her feel small, but she also hated ignoring that nagging sense that something wasn't right. She shook her head. "The gutter?" she asked, barely a whisper. "It's still scraping." Dean exhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves and his own. "Fine," he said, his voice lower now, careful. "Let's check the perimeter. Flashlight, jackets. 5 minutes. Quick." They slipped on shoes in the entryway, grabbed a small flashlight from the counter, and moved cautiously toward the garage door. Rain from earlier had left the driveway slick. Each step echoed unnaturally on the wet concrete, making the familiar cul-de-sac feel alien. As they stepped outside, the neighborhood seemed silent, too silent. A single streetlight flickered at the far end, struggling against a heavy, damp wind. The house next door had its blinds drawn tightly, giving it a shuttered, withdrawn look. Marcy's hand trembled slightly as she aimed the flashlight toward the side of the house. "See anything?" Dean asked, his voice taut. Marcy shook her head, frowning. "No, just the shadows. Shadows cast by the porch light, sure, but shapes could trick the eye, especially now." Then a scraping noise. Metal against stone again. Louder this time. They both froze. Dean's face hardened, the protective edge she loved, but it only made her worry spike higher. "Back door," Dean said, moving toward the garage side entrance. Maybe a branch, maybe nothing. Marcy's stomach churned. "I don't think it's nothing." They reached the back door, and Dean tugged the handle. Locked. Good. He glanced at Marcy. "Everything okay?" Her fingers brushed the cold doorknob. She noticed a scratch on the paint she hadn't seen before, thin but jagged, running along the edge where the door met the frame. Her heart sped. Dean noticed her gaze. "Probably the movers," he said quickly. "The boxes scratched it, that's all." Marcy swallowed. The rational part of her wanted to believe him. The anxious part wanted to run. She could feel her chest tightening. The lamp flicker, the scrape, the shadow, the scratch, they all collided in her mind into a small, tight knot of dread. "Let's check the backyard," Dean said. "Quick. Then we'll call it a night." Marcy followed him, flashlight cutting arcs through the dark. The grass was slick from rain. She noticed footprints she didn't recognize, small, messy impressions leading from the side fence toward the back porch. "Dean, look," she whispered. He crouched, shining the light on the prints. He murmured. "Could be a neighbor kid, maybe raccoons." His voice trailed off, and he ran a hand over his jaw, worried now. That's messy for a raccoon. Marcy felt a wave of nausea. Her flaw, her need to notice everything, to catch inconsistencies before they became disasters, made her feel trapped in a loop of what if. She hated how often it left her frozen, waiting. But waiting now could be worse. A sudden bang from the front porch made them both jump. The flashlight swung in Marcy's hands, landing on the small wooden railing, now showing a fresh dent. "Someone's messing with the door," Marcy shouted, stepping back. Dean grabbed her arm. "No, stay calm. Let's not assume the worst." But even as he said it, his fingers were trembling. He was usually calm in emergencies, but tonight, the uncertainty gnawed at him. The air grew heavier, humid with the scent of wet wood, and the faint metallic tang of rainwater pooling near the foundation. The wind picked up, rattling the gutter where the first scrape had come from, making them both flinch. "Call the police?" Marcy asked, her voice sharper now. Her anxiety, usually manageable, had threaded into panic. She could imagine someone watching, waiting for them to let their guard down. Dean pulled out his phone. No signal. The little bar in the corner blinked once, then vanished. "No signal," he muttered. "Great." Marcy's pulse jumped. Her fear, the need to anticipate every risk, pressed hard now. "What if someone's in the house?" she said, barely above a whisper. Dean's jaw tightened. "Then we stay outside. We don't go in alone. We wait for someone to come by." But his eyes flicked toward the back door, toward the faintly open gap where the screen rattled against the frame. "We need to secure the house. Now." The rain started again, light at first, then heavier. It pelted the roof and pooled on the porch. The darkness wrapped tighter, and the wet air made every sound sharper. A branch scraping the siding, water dripping from the gutter, a distant car passing with tires hissing on asphalt. Dean and Marcy moved quickly to the front of the house. As they approached, the front porch light flickered one last time before going out completely. They were plunged into a soft black, interrupted only by the flashlight beam and the muted city glow behind them. Then they saw it. A shadow shifting near the front window, the one overlooking their bedroom. Not fleeting this time. It paused, then moved again. Marcy froze, gripping Dean's arm. Her private fear of being powerless when she could see the signs, but couldn't stop the outcome, hit her full force. Dean whispered, "Don't move. Wait. Let's see if it's real." Before they could decide what to do next, a sudden clatter from inside the house, the sound of a door being nudged open, metal scraping on wood, shook them both. Their safe perimeter had been breached, and the clock was ticking. They had to act, and fast. Dean crouched low, gripping the flashlight like a lifeline, and signaled for Marcy to stay close. They moved along the front porch, where the wet boards creaked under every careful step. Rain still dripped from the eaves, forming tiny rivulets that ran to the corner of the house. The front window, the one facing their bedroom, showed no movement at first. Then a shadow flicked across the curtain, fast, deliberate. "Did you see that?" Marcy whispered, her teeth chattering despite the jacket she'd pulled tightly around herself. Dean nodded, swallowing hard. "I saw it. Stay calm. Let's check the front and side perimeter. We'll circle around quick." They moved toward the driveway, the flashlight beam catching the slick concrete, the edges of the lawn pooling with rainwater. Marcy's shoes slipped once, but Dean caught her elbow before she fell. She cursed softly, heart hammering. The backyard, visible from the side path, was darker than the front, trees, and a chain-link fence blotting out what little streetlight remained. Attempt 1, checking doors and windows. Dean reached the side door, pulling it gently. Locked. Good. The screen rattled faintly, but the metal latch held. Marcy pressed her ear to the back window, nothing. Then, a sudden scrape from the corner of the house made her leap backward, knocking the flashlight onto the wet concrete. The beam spun wildly, landing on a garbage can that had toppled in the wind. "Just the trash," Dean said after a moment, picking up the flashlight. "Wind blew it, nothing else." Marcy exhaled shakily, feeling her nerves fray. But the scratch along the back door frame was fresh, jagged. Whoever, or whatever, had touched the house left traces. Footprints led up from the side yard and disappeared near the back porch. Attempt 2, calling for help. Dean tried his phone again. Signal, still non-existent. No bars, no LTE, nothing. Frustration pressed against him. "Okay, fire department, maybe," he muttered, dialing emergency numbers anyway. Straight to voicemail. Marcy felt panic rise. The fear she normally controlled of being powerless, of failing to prevent disaster, slammed into her chest. Her hands shook as she checked each window frame, flashlight illuminating smudges and scratches that hadn't been there before. A low, metallic drip sound echoed from the gutter above, irregular, like something scraping its edge, and she flinched. Then a distant sound, low, heavy, like a branch snapping under weight. Marcy froze. Her mind jumped to the worst-case scenario. Someone had climbed the fence. Dean leaned close. "Probably just a branch or a raccoon," he whispered. His words were meant to calm, but his voice was thin, unsteady. He glanced at the chain-link fence. The footprints didn't continue there, and yet the sound came from that direction. Marcy wanted to scream. Instead, she grabbed a garden rake leaning against the wall. "I'll check," she said, though her voice trembled. She crept toward the fence, flashlight in one hand, rake in the other. Shadows leapt between the trees. Her breath caught as a dark shape shifted near the far end of the yard. She raised the flashlight, and the beam caught a trash bag, swaying in the wind. A raccoon darted out, skittering across the lawn and disappearing. Marcy's shoulders sagged, relief flooding through her, but the scare left her trembling. Dean crouched beside her, scanning the perimeter. "Okay, we know it's not inside yet." "That's good," he said, though his teeth were clenched. but the signs were multiplying. Scratches on the doors, footprints leading to the porch, the back window curtains now slightly askew, though they hadn't been before. The rain had eased slightly, but the wind continued to push water along the siding, creating small, haunting sounds like whispers or fingernails on wood. Misdirection and exhaustion. They paused near the corner of the house, backs pressed against damp siding. Marcy's legs ached, her chest burned from the adrenaline. Dean rubbed at a small scrape on his hand from the porch railing. He'd missed it earlier. "We need to fortify," he said. "Board up windows if we have to, or something. But we can't stay exposed here." They moved to the garage door. Dean pried it open, just enough to peek inside. Empty. The dim overhead light flickered weakly. Marcy scanned the interior. Then she gasped. A shadow darted across the far side of the garage. She froze. Heart pounding, she whispered, "Someone in there." Dean shone the flashlight fully inside. Empty. Just a pile of boxes shifting slightly as rainwater leaked through the roof crack. "Just boxes," he muttered, though the tension in his shoulders betrayed his relief was half-baked. The house seemed to shift around them, alive with minor disturbances. Dripping water, a loose shingle banging in the wind, the faint smell of damp wood and iron. Marcy's anxiety throbbed in rhythm with the small sounds, each one amplified in her mind. Point of no return moment. They returned to the front porch. The porch light remained dead. Marcy glanced toward the bedroom window. The curtains had moved again. This time, she was certain not a shadow, not a trick of light. Something or someone had brushed against it, leaving the fabric swaying in a slow, deliberate rhythm. Dean stepped forward. "We have to go inside," he said firmly. "We can't just sit out here and wait." Marcy's pulse spiked. Going inside meant leaving the limited safety of the open yard, of clear sightlines, for the confined space of the house. But staying out risked exposure, missteps, and more anxiety-driven panic. She nodded, gripping his arm. They approached the front door together. Each step was measured, deliberate. But when Dean reached the handle, he found it slightly ajar. Not unlocked ajar. Neither had touched it. Marcy swallowed hard, the fear she usually kept at bay fully blossoming. This was no longer a test of nerves or vigilance. It was real, immediate. Whoever or whatever was interacting with the house was inside. Retreat was no longer an option. They stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind them. The living room was dim, lit only by the failing glow from the streetlights outside. Every shadow seemed to stretch and move. Marcy's flashlight scanned across the floor. Nothing. Yet she could feel the weight of eyes on her, the house itself, or someone in it watching. Their fight for control had begun, and there was no turning back. The front door clicked shut behind them, the faint thud echoing across the living room. Marcy's flashlight cut jagged arcs across the walls, highlighting the scratches on the doorframe and the slightly askew curtains. Dean held his own light steady, scanning the shadowed corners. Every small noise, the rain drumming on the roof, the creak of a loose floorboard, felt magnified. Every whisper of movement, a warning. "Bedroom first," Dean said, voice low. "Check the windows, then the closet. Don't split up." Marcy nodded, clutching the flashlight like a shield. Her hands shook and her chest tightened, but she forced herself to move. Each step on the carpet felt deliberate, calculated. The hallway seemed longer than it should have, the dim glow from the streetlights outside making the walls appear to breathe. They reached the bedroom. The curtains had been disturbed again, twisted slightly as if someone had brushed them. Marcy's stomach knotted. She crouched to peer under the bed, nothing. Dean checked the closet, empty. The small dents on the dresser caught the flashlight, reminders of minor scuffles that hadn't occurred. Then a sound. A muffled shuffle from the basement door, the narrow wooden staircase just beyond the kitchen. Dean's hand went to the banister. "That's it," he whispered. "Someone's down there." Marcy's fingers grazed the edge of the flashlight beam, brushing the back wall. Her anxiety sharpened into something more focused fear, braided with clarity. "We need a plan," she said. Dean nodded. "Garage door key in the kitchen. We barricade from there, maybe call the cops once we're secure." "You ready?" "Ready," Marcy gritted her teeth. They moved toward the kitchen. The floorboards groaned under their weight, and the flickering streetlight outside made every shadow jump. Marcy noticed again the scratch along the back doorframe, the footprints leading up the porch. Whoever had been outside had touched the house, gotten in. Was it the same person now below them? Dean opened the garage door just enough to slide boxes and a folding chair across the handle, creating a makeshift barricade. Marcy grabbed knives from the drawer, anything sharp. They stood back to back near the door, listening. Then the basement door creaked. A heavy footstep. Pause, another step. Marcy's hands shook, but she gripped a chef's knife tightly. Dean had a baseball bat in hand, muscles tense. The sound of the basement steps echoed through the house, and then a faint metallic scrape. The rake they had used earlier in the yard, still leaning by the back door, had shifted, tapping against the floor. "Wait," Dean hissed. "Probably nothing, maybe a branch." Marcy's eyes narrowed. Not a branch. A shadow flickered under the basement doorway. A figure, tall and hunched, moved with deliberate slowness. The light caught the glint of a tool, a crowbar, maybe, held loosely. Dean stepped forward, voice firm. "Hey, police will be called. Stay where you are." The figure froze, then shifted again. Marcy's adrenaline spiked. This was no game. They had seconds to act. Marcy darted forward, improvising. She swung the flashlight hard against the figure's arm, hopping to disorient. The shadow stumbled, cursing, and Dean followed with the bat, striking the leg. The figure fell partially, slamming into the first step of the basement stairs. The metallic clatter of the crowbar hitting the railing echoed through the house. The intruder scrambled back, and in the scuffle, the basement light, forgotten until now, flickered on. Marcy saw him clearly, mid-30s, wiry, wearing a soaked hoodie and muddy jeans. Panic flashed across his face as he realized he had underestimated them. Dean kept the bat raised, breathing hard. "Back away," he ordered. "Out the basement, or we go down after you." The man hesitated, then lunged toward the stairs. Marcy sidestepped, tripping on the edge of the floorboard, and hit the ground hard. Pain shot through her ankle, sharp and real. Dean reacted instantly, swinging the bat to block the figure from reaching the main floor. The intruder cursed and stumbled down the last 3 steps, hitting the concrete basement floor. The sound of impact and a grunt of pain made Marcy flinch. She struggled to her knees, heart hammering. Rainwater dripping from the basement ceiling had pooled slightly, making the first step slick, slowing the man's movement and giving Dean space to grab his phone and finally dial 911. The dispatcher answered immediately. Dean whispered their location while keeping his eyes on the basement. Marcy hobbled closer, knife still in hand, scanning for more surprises. "Police are 5 minutes away," the dispatcher said. Dean exhaled, but the tension didn't leave. Every creak, every drip, every shadow felt magnified. The man groaned, trying to stand, but slipping slightly on the wet concrete. Marcy's pulse raced. She could see the scratches on the basement walls he'd left in his hurried descent. The metal gutter scraping outside earlier, the footprints, the porch dents now made sense. This was no trick of the wind or raccoon. He had been around the house, testing doors, waiting for them to let down their guard. Dean whispered sharply, "Stay calm, wait for them, don't engage." The intruder lurched toward the corner, dragging the crowbar, clearly trying to find a tool or exit. The police sirens wailed faintly in the distance. The man froze, then bolted toward the basement window at the far end. Marcy felt a sudden jolt of fear he could escape into the night, but then slipped on a small puddle of water, hitting the concrete hard. He groaned loudly, immobilized just long enough for Dean to make the window's latch click closed and lock it. The sirens grew louder, closer. The intruder made one final attempt to rise, then slumped against the wall, breathing hard and bleeding slightly from a cut on his forehead where he'd hit the step. Dean stayed at the top of the stairs, tense, until headlights flashed through the front windows. 2 officers stormed the house, and the man finally gave up, raising his hands in surrender. Marcy collapsed against Dean, ankle throbbing, sweat mixing with rainwater and tears of relief. The police handcuffed the man, questioning him quickly. He had a record for burglary, had been watching the neighborhood for weeks, testing houses at night. They noted all the minor disturbances, the scratches, dents, moved curtains were his doing. The wind, the rain, the noises had only amplified Marcy and Dean's anxiety. After the intruder was taken away, Marcy sat on the wet floor, hand pressed to her ankle, flashlight still clutched. Dean rested beside her, exhausted. They were safe, but the tension had left marks: a sprained ankle, cuts on hands, and the lingering knowledge that someone had been inside their home, right where they slept, studying their routines. Marcy's breathing gradually slowed, but the house felt different now, every shadow a potential threat. Dean squeezed her shoulder. "We did it," he said softly, but the victory felt muted. They had survived, yes, but the emotional and physical toll lingered, and the sense that the house could watch them again would not easily fade. The first rays of dawn filtered through the blinds, weak and gray, falling across the living room where Marcy sat with her ankle propped on a coffee table, wrapped in a cold compress. Her face was pale, tired, but the sharp tension that had gripped her all night had begun to ebb, leaving a residual ache in her muscles and a slow pulse in her chest. Dean crouched beside her, nursing a steaming mug of coffee. His own hands were scraped, knuckles still stinging from the scuffle in the basement. He had stayed silent through most of the night, focusing on action and survival. But now, in the quiet aftermath, exhaustion had taken hold. Neither spoke much, words felt unnecessary. Instead, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the soft patter of leftover rain on the roof and the distant hum of a city waking up. The police had taken a statement, and the intruder had been transported to the local precinct. Dean had insisted on accompanying them briefly, just to confirm the man would be processed. Marcy stayed behind, watching the back porch, her eyes lingering on the wet footprints and the small dents that had been made the night before. They were minor damage, easily repaired, but each mark felt like a scar, a reminder of how close they had come. After the officers left, Dean inspected the house systematically. He checked locks, reinforced doors with extra bolts, and inspected the windows again, this time knotting the weak latches that had made the night more dangerous. Marcy had helped, but her focus was scattered, half on the house, half on her own racing thoughts. She traced the scratches on the back doorframe with a finger, remembering the scrape that had started everything. Her hyper-awareness, usually a tool she relied on at work and in life, now felt like a double-edged sword. Every imperfection, every shift in shadows, every small sound made her flinch. Even the sound of the faucet running in the kitchen made her glance over her shoulder. She knew rationally that the intruder was gone, that the police had the man, but her body didn't trust reason yet. Dean noticed her unease. "Want to take a walk outside?" he asked. The day was gray, but calm. The storm passed. She hesitated, then nodded. The sidewalk was slick from the morning drizzle, and the neighborhood felt ordinary again. Cars parked, garbage bins upright, birds calling somewhere overhead. But the house itself loomed differently. Shadows lingered in corners, even in the daylight, and the sense of being watched had not entirely left her. Marcy's phone buzzed with a message from the police department. They had logged the intruder and would contact her for further statements if necessary. It was procedural, but each ping made her stomach knot anew. Dean kept glancing at her, protective and aware of how fragile her nerves were. They moved cautiously around the yard, noting how the footprints had begun to fade in the drying grass. Marcy pointed toward the basement window. "We need to fix that," she said, voice quieter than usual, almost muttering. Dean agreed. "New lock, maybe a security bar, but today we rest. Let the professionals handle the rest." The morning unfolded slowly, mundane in appearance: coffee, laundry, the quiet buzz of distant traffic, but both of them felt different. Marcy's ankle throbbed with a dull ache. Dean's knuckles were stiff, and beneath their calm, a frayed thread of tension remained. Their home had been violated in ways both obvious and subtle, and the sense that the house itself had been witness lingered like a shadow in their minds. By late morning, a repairman arrived for minor damages: a dented doorframe, a broken latch, a slightly bent porch railing. Marcy hovered near him, directing while Dean supervised. The small repairs, though practical, could not mend the intangible: her trust in the quiet, the normalcy of this suburban street, or the knowledge that someone had mapped their routines, studied their home while they slept. Lunch was silent, eaten at the counter. Marcy's hand absently traced the edge of the table, tapping a rhythm she did not notice. Dean watched her. "You'll sleep tonight," he said gently, "and we'll be careful, but we'll be okay." Marcy nodded, though she didn't fully believe it. The house felt alive in its own way now, not with movement, not with eyes, but with memory. Every scratch, every dent, every whisper of wind along the siding seemed to be catalogued somewhere in her mind, replaying in small bursts whenever a door creaked or a shadow shifted. The day stretched on, uneventful but heavy. By evening, they had patched most of the visible damage, checked locks again, and even reinforced the basement window. Marcy rested on the sofa, her tea cooling beside her, eyes flicking occasionally toward the now still porch. The emotional residue of the night refused to let her fully relax. Dean, cleaning up tools, glanced at the street. Everything seemed ordinary, mundane. Yet, a single detail caught his eye: a muddy footprint on the far side of the yard, just outside the fence, partially obscured by morning dew. He froze, heart tightening, before realizing it was likely the neighbor's dog from earlier walks. Still, he said nothing. The small moment of doubt was enough. They didn't need to speak it aloud. Night arrived, darker and slower than usual. Marcy climbed into bed first, Dean beside her. The blankets were heavy, the pillows stiff with the weight of a restless day. Neither spoke, and after a time, Dean reached for her hand. She allowed it, grateful for the contact, but her eyes kept scanning the room, the window, the small cracks in the door frame. Sleep finally came, fitful and punctuated with dreams of shadows and scratches. Every sound: the wind brushing a tree, a faucet dripping, the faint hum of the refrigerator tugged at her attention. And even when she closed her eyes fully, a sliver of awareness stayed, a caution she could not fully discard. The intruder was gone, yes, but the house and what had happened within it remained. and in the far corner of the living room, by the baseboard near the window. A faint smudge remained on the paint, too small to notice at first, easily overlooked. Marcy did not see it. Dean did not notice. Yet both had a lingering sense that some part of last night's danger had left a trace they had not yet accounted for. A reminder that vigilance in a home once violated never truly ended. That's tonight's story. If it gave you chills, make sure to like, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and tap the bell so you never miss what's coming next. And if you're still brave enough, there are more dark tailies waiting for you right here on the channel. Go watch another if you dare. Hey everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is The Last Recording from Room 6. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The fluorescent lights in the hospital corridor flickered once, then again, just long enough to make the peeling paint along the ceiling look like it was poolsing. It wasn't late, only 7:30, but the quiet made it feel like midnight. A wheeled tray clattered somewhere down the hall, and faint voices leaked from the nurse's station. But otherwise, it was still. Too still. Jenna Cole adjusted the strap of her shoulder bag and stepped cautiously past room 5. She had been a medical transcriptionist for almost 4 years, mostly working nights, and she'd walked this corridor hundreds of times. Tonight felt different. She noticed the hum of the overhead ventilation, the faint chemical tang of disinfectant, and oddly the smell of something sweet, almost like burnt sugar, drifting from behind one of the closed doors. She paused, shaking it off. Hospitals had weird smells. That was normal. Hey, a voice called, breaking the monotony. It was quiet, but carried an edge of forced cheer. Dr. Owen Blake leaned against the doorway of room 7, rubbing his temples like he'd been up too long. You're late. Only by 15 minutes, Jenna said, trying for casual. Her stomach did a little flip. She hated being late. She always hated it. Even when it was beyond her control, that little twinge of guilt never left. Owen pushed off the doorframe. He was tall, mid-30s, with the kind of calm face that made him easy to trust. He kept his hair cropped short and his scrubs neatly pressed. But Jenna had learned long ago that his easy confidence masked a kind of stubborn anxiety. He hated admitting when he didn't know something. He never let it show, though. You already started on room 6, she asked, letting her gaze drift to the next door down the hall. It was unremarkable white, scuffed at the edges, but she felt the pull of it, like something just on the edge of attention. Owen shook his head. Not yet. Patients here are all stable, but I don't know. Something felt off when I walked past. Maybe I'm just tired. Probably, Jenna said. Her voice was calm, but her hands itched with unease. She had a knack for noticing things others overlooked. Sometimes that skill got her in trouble. Sometimes it kept her alive. They moved together down the hall. A faint beep came from a machine inside room 5. Then silence. Then the low murmur of a voice, soft, almost too low to hear. It stopped as soon as they got closer. "Did you hear that?" Jenna asked. Owen frowned. "Hear what?" She shook her head. "Never mind." Jenna had been feeling a little on edge all evening. There was nothing to pinpoint, nothing that screamed danger. But the sensation sat behind her ribcage like a small animal, restless. Her phone buzzed briefly in her bag, a muted vibration that echoed like a hiccup through the quiet. She pulled it out, a message from her sister, just a thumbs-up emoji. Small, meaningless, but for some reason, it made her tighten her grip on the strap. They stopped outside room 6. The door was slightly ajar, more than usual, and the soft hum from inside sounded irregular, like the heart of the room had skipped a beat. "You go first," Owen said, gesturing toward the room. He was trying to be casual, but the crease between his eyebrows betrayed him. Jenna glanced at the interior. The patient bed was empty, neatly made. A tray of medical supplies sat at the side. Everything looked fine. And yet, the air inside felt different, heavier, warmer. She noticed a small recorder on the bedside table, its red recording light blinking steadily. "Oh," she said softly. "What is it?" Owen stepped closer, peering over her shoulder. Jenna tilted her head toward the device. "Someone's recording. Already? That's unusual. No one is supposed to start recording yet. Not without orders." Owen frowned. Could be a previous transcriptionist left it running. Maybe a patient request. Maybe, Jenna said, though she didn't believe it. The feeling of wrongness persisted, prickling along her skin. She glanced around the room, noting details, an unmarked chart on the counter, the faint scuff of shoes along the linoleum, the slightly askew pillow. Normal, everyday things. Yet something about them felt slightly out of place, just enough to gnaw at her sense of reason. "I'll check the charts," Owen muttered, moving toward the nurse call panel. "You check the recorder." Jenna nodded, hesitating. Her fingers hovered over the small device, then she pressed play. A voice filled the room, not loud, not dramatic, just ordinary. A man speaking, but not to anyone in the room, narrating things that didn't quite make sense yet. She frowned. Owen cleared his throat. Should we call someone?" Jenna shook her head. "No, not yet. Let's just see what's going on." Her pulse quickened, a quiet thrum in her ears. Something about that room, the subtle deviations from normalcy, the quiet insistence of the recording, made her stomach twist. She knew she'd remember this moment. Remember walking in, noticing the slight imperfection, and deciding not to step back. Owen glanced at her, eyebrows raised. "You're really doing this?" She nodded again. "We need to know." And with that, the decision was made. They would investigate room 6, not out of recklessness, not out of bravado, but out of a quiet, stubborn need to understand the small breaks from reality that whispered insistently that something was off. Jenna's fingers hovered over the recorder, but she hesitated. The voice was faint now, almost mundane, just counting vitals and medications in a clipped, monotonous tone. She glanced up at Owen. It's not a patient's voice, at least not one of ours. Owen frowned, packing slowly. Could be someone new, a temp maybe, or a contractor. They do bring in outside people for equipment checks sometimes. Contractors don't just set up a recorder in a patient's room without authorization, Jenna said, feeling the edge in her voice. She hated breaking rules, hated being the one to cause trouble, but she also hated leaving things unresolved. That urge, her need to fix anomalies, was always stronger than her fear. And tonight, it pushed her into the room. She stepped closer, listening. The recorder crackled faintly. Then the voice came again, low and deliberate. Vitals stable. Nothing unusual yet. Waiting for response. Owen froze mid-step, waiting for response. That's what I heard, Jenna said, furrowing her brow. The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. It doesn't make sense. A sudden clang from the hallway made them both jump. A cart had toppled over somewhere near the nurse's station. Footsteps followed, fast, but distant. Normal hospital noise, but the timing, it sharpened their nerves. Owen rubbed his eyes, muttering under his breath. I don't like this. Something's off. You don't have to like it, Jenna snapped, softer than she intended. She took a deep breath. We need to check the room, the chart, the recorder. One of us has to. Owen shook his head. I'm telling you, Jenna, I shouldn't be the first in. You're better with details. You see what others miss. I trust you more in situations like this. She gave him a tight smile, but her stomach twisted. She hated it when people relied on her like that made her responsible for outcomes she couldn't control. That fear of failing, of letting someone down, tightened around her chest like a tourniquet. Fine, she said finally, stepping fully into room 6. The air felt warmer, denser, and the smell, the faint sweetness, was more noticeable. She glanced at the bed. Still empty, still made, still normal. But now the recording felt wrong in a way she couldn't articulate. Owen followed reluctantly, keeping a hand near the door. Check the panel. Check everything, he murmured. I'll watch the hallway. Jenna nodded and moved to the bedside chart. It was blank odd, because a patient should have updates by now. She flipped it open carefully. No notes. No vitals logged. Only the nurse's signature from the previous shift. Okay, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. This is weird. Suddenly, the recorder beeped differently, a short, rapid tone, and then cut out entirely. She tapped it. Dead. No lights. Nothing. Great, Owen said, exhaling sharply. Battery malfunction. Maybe, Jenna said, but she felt a cold knot of apprehension. Devices didn't just die mid-recording unless someone tampered with them, or they weren't meant to be there in the first place. Should we call security? Owen asked. He had an edge to his voice now. the kind that came when he didn't know the right answer and didn't want anyone to see it. Jenna hesitated. Calling security could escalate things, but staying quiet, investigating meant she was the first to discover what had been recorded. Her private fear of being blamed, of making the wrong call, pressed down on her. She didn't want responsibility, yet she felt trapped by it. "Let's check the cameras first," she said finally. "Maybe the hall footage will show who went in or out of this room. Maybe it's nothing serious." Owen nodded, following her lead, though his steps were cautious, deliberate. They moved down the hall to the nurse's station. Jenna swiped the access card, and the security monitor flickered to life. Grainy footage of the corridor played back in slow loops. Most of it was empty. A cart rolled by at one point. Someone's shoe appeared briefly, a staff member, but it didn't match the voice from the recording. "Where'd it go?" Owen asked, leaning over her shoulder. Jenna squinted. The angle didn't cover room 6's doorway entirely, just the edge of it. But she could see shadows shifting, subtle, unidentifiable movements. "That's not good," she said, more to herself than him. Owen pinched the bridge of his nose. "We should call someone now. Admin, security, anyone. This isn't normal." Jenna felt the knot in her chest tighten again. "And admit we walked in without authorization, that we found a device we weren't supposed to." She could feel her pulse quicken. She hated confrontation. She hated being wrong, but she hated ignoring anomalies even more. Footsteps echoed sharply down the corridor, closer this time. They weren't fast, not exactly running, but purposeful. Owen's head snapped up. "Someone's coming." Jenna froze. Do we stay, or do we leave? The sound of keys jingling, followed by a voice loud, annoyed, unfamiliar, made them both stiffen. "Jenna, Owen, what the hell are you two doing?" They turned to see Nurse Kelsey Matthews, mid-30s, brisk and efficient, pushing a supply cart. She frowned, noticing the open door to room 6 and the two standing there. "The patient in room 6 isn't scheduled until tomorrow morning." Why is that door open?" Before either of them could respond, Jenna's gaze flicked back to the bedside table. The recorder had reactivated on its own. A red light blinked steadily. Neither of them had touched it. Owen whispered, "That's impossible." Jenna swallowed hard. The pulse of unease she'd been ignoring all evening rose sharply. Their small decision to investigate had now escalated. Not just protocol breach, but a device behaving strangely, movement in the hallway, and a nurse about to demand answers they weren't ready to give. They were caught between leaving and facing reprimand, or staying and digging further into a problem that could be much bigger than either of them realized. Jenna realized she had no easy option, and the longer she stared at that blinking light, the more certain she became that walking away now wasn't going to solve anything. Jenna's eyes stayed locked on the blinking recorder, but she could feel Owen behind her, shifting nervously from foot to foot in the narrow space between the bed and the wall. The hospital corridor outside was dimly lit. The soft hum of the ventilation system, a low undertone to the occasional squeak of a cart rolling down the linoleum. They were trapped between curiosity and protocol, and the air felt thicker with every passing second. "Let's get this on a laptop," Jenna said finally, trying to sound decisive. "If we can isolate the audio, maybe we can figure out who it is or what they're doing." Owen nodded, and they moved quickly down the corridor toward the small IT room on the east wing, near the staff lounge. Jenna clutched the recorder tightly, aware of every echo of their footsteps. The hum of the lights overhead seemed louder, irregular, almost as if it pulsed in sync with her heartbeat. When they reached the IT room, they hit the first roadblock. The laptop Owen grabbed was nearly dead, its battery warning flashing urgently. Jenna tried connecting the recorder, but the device wasn't recognized. "It's like it's encrypted or malfunctioning," she muttered, frustration tightening her jaw. "Could be proprietary," Owen said, frowning. "Some devices are weird like that. But why would someone leave it in an empty patient room?" Before Jenna could respond, the intercom buzzed, and Nurse Matthews's voice came through, sharp and impatient. "Owen, Jenna, status update. I need that room secured." Jenna's stomach sank. They couldn't explain this yet, not without drawing attention to the blinking recorder, the empty chart, or the shadowy hallway movements. We're on it," Owen replied. His voice wavered slightly. Jenna ran her hands through her hair. "We need a second attempt. Maybe we can just check the footage on the cameras near room 6 again, closer this time." They slipped back down the corridor, careful not to attract attention. Jenna's pulse was high, every step along the linoleum floor making a faint echo that sounded louder than it should. When they reached the wall-mounted monitors, she leaned close to the grainy screens. The angle from earlier still didn't show the whole doorway, but now they caught a flash, something moving inside the room, subtle, just at the edge of the doorframe. "Did you see that?" she whispered, heart pounding. Owen squinted. "It's maybe a shadow from the cart in the hall. Look, the lights are flickering." Jenna shook her head, unwilling to let herself be reassured. Something moved deliberately behind the half-closed door. A sleeve, a glint of metal. She pressed rewind and slow-played the footage again. Her stomach sank. It wasn't a hallucination. Something or someone had been inside room 6. They looked at each other, and Owen muttered, "Okay, that's not good." Attempt number 2. Return to room 6 and confront the recorder directly. Jenna led the way. She opened the door just enough to slip inside, the recorder still blinking, steady red. Her fingers hovered above it. She noticed a faint scuff on the floor near the bedside table, a small footprint smeared slightly. Someone had been there recently. Before she could react, a loud bang echoed from the supply closet down the hall. They both jumped, spinning toward the sound. Owen's hand brushed against the corner of the wall. A slight scrape drew a thin line of blood across his palm. He winced, but kept moving. "What was that?" he whispered. "Probably a cart," Jenna said, though the unease in her voice betrayed her. "The closet door isn't fully latched." They both paused, ears straining. The sound of something dragging along the linoleum floor made their stomachs twist. It wasn't fast, not urgent, but deliberate, a slow scraping. Jenna swallowed hard, her palms clammy. She forced herself to step toward the bedside table. The recorder had stopped blinking. "Dead." "Great," Owen muttered. "Now it's off again." Jenna bent closer. Then a shadow fell across the doorway. A figure, just a silhouette, loomed, and her heart leapt into her throat. She gripped the recorder tightly. "Who's there?" Owen's voice was low but sharp. The figure moved back quickly, and in the dim overhead light, she realized it wasn't a person. A tall coat rack in the corner had fallen over, the long shadows of jackets and bags creating the illusion of a human presence. Her shoulders slumped, tension easing slightly, though the adrenaline still coursed through her. "God, my eyes," Jenna muttered, rubbing them. Owen chuckled tensely. Good thing it wasn't real. They regrouped, breathless, and Jenna set the recorder on the bed. She noticed a small piece of tape on the back of it. A label, handwritten, "Do not remove." She frowned. Whoever left this wanted it preserved or watched. Time was slipping. They knew someone could arrive at any moment, yet the recorder had offered no clues. Attempt number 2 had failed, and it had left them physically tense and mentally frayed. Attempt number 3. Isolate the device using their phones as temporary recorders, trying to capture audio directly before the original stopped again. Jenna placed her phone near the recorder. She pressed record and leaned back slightly, heart hammering. A faint crackle emerged, almost inaudible at first. Then a voice, low, deliberate, clipped. Vitals stable. Nothing unusual yet. Waiting for response. Jenna froze. She realized the voice wasn't narrating the room, it was responding to something. Someone or something was waiting, and they were listening. Owen's hand touched her shoulder. "We can't keep doing this," he whispered. "If someone's watching, they'll know we're here." Jenna's chest tightened. Retreating now would mean leaving unanswered questions, leaving evidence in place for someone unknown. She realized with sudden clarity there was no turning back. They had committed. Any hesitation, any delay, could mean they'd be caught unaware or worse. Their chance to understand the recorder's purpose would vanish. A distant voice echoed in the corridor, security rounding the corner, keys jingling, footsteps deliberate. Jenna's eyes darted to the window in the door. No escape routes. Her mind raced, pulse thrumming in her ears. The recorder continued its faint, persistent narration. Jenna and Owen exchanged a look, silent understanding passing between them. Whatever was happening in room 6, whatever the recorder was documenting, they were in it now, fully. And nothing about the room, the shadows, the device, or the hallway made it safe to leave. Jenna and Owen crouched just inside room 6, pressed close to the bed. The recorder's faint, clipped voice continued, steady and unnervingly deliberate. Vitals stable. Nothing unusual yet. Waiting for response. The corridor outside had gone silent. Too silent. Every sound, the hum of ventilation, the faint squeak of a cart in a distant hallway felt amplified, underscoring the tension that clawed at Jenna's chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the recorder. She realized the voice had shifted tone subtly. There were now pauses between each phrase, almost like someone was listening, waiting for them to act. "They're monitoring it," Owen whispered. His hand rested against the doorframe, smeared with dried blood from the earlier scrape. "Whoever set this up, they know we're here." Jenna's stomach twisted. The room no longer felt like a safe, sterile environment. The faint sweetness in the air seemed more pungent now, almost suffocating. She swallowed hard. "Then we need to end this, figure out what it's recording, and get out." Owen nodded. "We improvise. We don't wait for permission. Just do it." She edged closer to the bedside table. The recorder's blinking light taunted her. Then she saw it. The small piece of tape on the back, the handwritten warning, "Do not remove." Her instincts screamed at her, but curiosity, drenched in terror, overrode caution. "Ready?" she asked. Owen nodded. "On 3. They lifted the recorder together. But at that exact moment, the door handle rattled violently. Jenna yelped. Footsteps pounded the corridor. Someone was coming fast, heavy, deliberate. Owen shoved the recorder into his bag. "Hide," he snapped. They dove behind the bed, flattening against the wall. The door opened abruptly, and a man stepped in. He was tall, lean, dressed in hospital maintenance clothes, with a clipboard tucked under one arm. His expression was calm but purposeful. "Who's in here?" the man demanded. Jenna's pulse raced. Every muscle tensed. Her voice barely emerged. We thought the room was scheduled." He waved a hand. No patients here, but you shouldn't be handling that." He pointed at the recorder. "Leave it, please." Owen stood slowly, hands raised. "We just wanted to see what it was, why it was recording." The man's eyes flicked to the floor, then back at them. "You really don't understand, do you?" he sighed. "This isn't for the patients. Not yet. It's a trial. Internal study, staff behavior, workflow efficiency, everything monitored." Jenna blinked, trying to process. "A study." "Yes," he said, voice tight. "But it's not approved for public access. Nobody's supposed to touch it. It's sensitive." A flicker of relief surged through her, immediately tangled with lingering fear. The stress, the adrenaline, the sense of intrusion. They hadn't been in danger from a malicious person, but the consequences were still real. Policy violations, potential disciplinary action, the weight of having handled something they weren't meant to touch. "Okay," Owen said cautiously. "We'll put it back." The man gestured. not just anywhere, on the table, exactly as you found it. As they set the recorder down, a small misstep, Jenna's heel catching on the edge of the bed, sent it sliding slightly. The red light flickered, then stabilized. The man's jaw tightened, a warning in his eyes. Jenna froze, heart hammering. "Careful," he said. They corrected it, and the recorder sat upright once more. Silence filled the room, except for the faint voice continuing its mechanical monitoring. Jenna's palms were damp. She could feel the tremor in Owen's hands as he rubbed at his scraped palm, already beginning to sting again. Finally, the man turned. "You shouldn't have come in here. If anyone asks, explain nothing. Understand?" "Yes," Jenna whispered. Owen nodded. "We understand." He left, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The corridor hummed back to its normal rhythm, yet the room felt hollow. The recorder continued, impersonal and steady, but the immediate threat had vanished. Jenna slumped against the wall, letting out a shuddering breath. Her chest ached, tight from tension. "That could have gone much worse," she murmured. Owen sank to the floor, wincing as he flexed his hand. "We're lucky." But he rubbed his temples, voice low. "I don't know if I'll ever want to hear a monitor voice again." Jenna let out a weak laugh, though it felt hollow. "We got out. That's the point. We did what we could with what we knew." They remained quiet for a moment, listening to the faint, mundane voice of the recorder. Safe, but changed. The room wasn't dangerous in the way she had imagined. It was the tension, the unknown, the weight of responsibility and mistakes that had left its mark. Eventually, Jenna stood, shoulders stiff. "We should leave. Go back to the nurse's station. Explain we were checking something small, maybe a protocol detail gone wrong. Let them handle it." Owen nodded, agreed, "Let's move." But even as they walked down the corridor, every footstep echoed differently now, heavier somehow. The sweetness in the air lingered faintly, an olfactory memory of fear. Jenna realized she would replay this night in her mind repeatedly, the minor injuries, the flashing lights, the misread shadow, the voice, and that unbearable tension of not knowing if someone or something was watching. And though the immediate danger was gone, they carried with them a new wariness. Rooms that seemed empty might not be. Devices that seemed mundane could hold secrets. And their own instincts, the need to investigate, to resolve, would forever be tinged with a memory of adrenaline, uncertainty, and the very real possibility of risk. They exited room 6. The corridor was now just a corridor again, sterile and humming. But they both knew it would never feel the same. The fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor had returned to their usual hum. To any casual observer, the evening shift was progressing normally. Nurses rolling carts, monitors beeping, a steady shuffle of footsteps echoing in linoleum halls. Yet for Jenna and Owen, the world had shifted imperceptibly along a fault line they could feel in their bones. They returned to the nurse's station, heads low, moving as if trying to blend in. Owen's hand was wrapped loosely in a clean bandage, the scrape still stinging with each movement. Jenna's shoulders were tight, her chest still carrying the ghost of adrenaline. Nurse Matthews looked up from her paperwork, eyebrows raised. Everything all right? Jenna forced a smile, careful, professional. Minor issue with room 6's equipment. Checked the chart, nothing critical. All handled. Owen nodded. Just routine protocol verification. The nurse's frown eased, though suspicion lingered. She didn't push. Hospitals ran on trust, and those who broke it were watched closely, but not interrogated immediately. Jenna let out a quiet sigh once they were out of view. I can't believe how worked up I got over a recorder. Owen rubbed his face. You weren't overreacting. That room, that device, it felt off for a reason. It's the not knowing that gets to you. She nodded, thinking about the recorder's red blinking light, the faint voice, the shadows she had misinterpreted, the sudden pounding of footsteps in the hallway. Her chest tightened again, and she realized she replay those moments repeatedly, a mental loop she couldn't quite break. Over the next hour, they completed their remaining rounds, avoiding room 6, letting it sit quiet and innocuous behind the door. Each step along the corridor reminded them that something as ordinary as a hospital room could become a source of terror when normalcy fractured. Later, back in the break room, Owen sipped lukewarm coffee, flexing his hand gingerly. I can feel that scrape more than I thought I would, he muttered. And the stress, I didn't expect it to linger like this. Jenna stirred her tea silently. She could feel her palms still damp, a faint tremor lingering in her fingers. I keep thinking about that voice, she admitted quietly. The way it paused like it was waiting, not dangerous, but aware. Owen looked at her, expression softening. We did everything we could. No patients were harmed. No one was malicious. We followed through and survived it intact. Yes, she agreed, yet her mind raced. Even with the explanation, an internal study, the combination of the unknown, the potential for misinterpretation, and the procedural risk had left them both changed. The hospital was a place of control, schedules, protocols. And yet, they had felt utterly powerless for 20 minutes, trapped by a simple machine and the ambiguity of human intent. That powerlessness lingered as a quiet, gnawing hum. By the time they clocked out, the corridor was near empty. Night had fallen fully, the dim exterior light seeping through the high windows, casting long shadows across the floor. They walked silently toward the exit. Jenna's bag hung heavily on her shoulder, her steps deliberate. Owen's stride was slower than usual, each step measured. Outside, the cool air was a relief, sharp against flushed skin. Jenna inhaled deeply, letting the crispness fill her lungs. For a moment, the tension eased. The city was quiet, normal even, the streets bathed in the soft glow of street lamps. And yet, she couldn't shake the image of the recorder's blinking light. She remembered the label, "Do not remove." The thought that someone had left it there, intentionally, monitoring events, stayed lodged in her mind. It was explained now, but somehow the reasoning did not entirely erase the uncertainty. What if there were other devices, other rooms? Owen's phone buzzed. He glanced down a message from his wife, checking if he was on his way home. He typed a quick reply, but his mind lingered on the scrape, the tension, the moments of unknowing. His confidence felt slightly frayed, not broken, but rearranged. Jenna caught a glimpse of the hospital behind them as they walked to their cars. Room 6 sat quietly in the distance, door closed, everything apparently normal. Yet she felt a small shiver, a whisper of doubt that perhaps some part of the room's purpose had been missed, overlooked, or misinterpreted. Something minor, trivial, or perhaps not. The drive home was quiet. Jenna kept her hands on the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. Owen was silent in the passenger seat, eyes on the passing streetlights. Words felt unnecessary. Their shared tension hung in the car like an invisible weight. When she pulled into her driveway, Jenna sat for a moment in the car, engine off, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes wide and tired. The adrenaline had faded, leaving something sharper. A thin edge of unease, a reminder that control was often an illusion, and routine could hide hazards she had never anticipated. Owen followed in his car, parking across the street. They exchanged a glance, one that spoke volumes. They had survived the night. No one was physically harmed beyond minor scratches and bruised nerves. Yet, in that glance, lay the acknowledgement that the world could feel ordinary, while harboring fractures that only revealed themselves in small, terrifying doses. Inside her apartment, Jenna locked the door behind her and sank onto the couch. She could hear the city outside, cars, distant sirens, the faint hum of streetlights. But her mind traced the sound of the recorder, the mechanical cadence of the voice, the slight hesitation in each phrase. She told herself it was over, that it had been explained. Yet she couldn't entirely silence the memory of being observed, of things happening just outside her line of sight. Owen arrived moments later at his apartment, dropping his bag on the floor. He flexed his hand again, wincing slightly. He went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood staring out the window at the night. That small trace of vigilance, the one that had saved them, remained, a quiet echo of the tension they had endured. Somewhere in the back of both their minds, a single thread remained unresolved. The blinking recorder, the label, the subtle pauses in the voice, and the sense that someone, somewhere, was watching. It was no longer immediate, no longer dangerous, but it was there, dormant, a quiet reminder that the ordinary could fracture in ways they might never fully anticipate. And with that lingering unease, the night ended. The hospital was quiet. The streets were calm. Life returned to its ordinary rhythm. But Jenna and Owen knew, silently, that ordinary would never quite feel the same again. Welcome back to Mia Horror Stories. Tonight's tale, the neighbor who never blinks, is best experienced in the dark, which is why the screen will stay black. No distractions, no flashing images, just you, your imagination, and the story. So sit back, relax, and listen all the way to the end, if you dare. The first time I noticed it, I tried to explain it away with something dumb and ordinary. A contact lens stuck, dry eyes, some kind of tick, because it was 9:17 p.m. and I was carrying 2 grocery bags that were cutting into my fingers. And the hallway smelled like someone's overcooked broccoli mixed with old carpet shampoo. And the last thing I wanted was a new mystery in a building that already had thin walls and a male thief. He was standing in the doorway across from mine, Unit 3B, half in shadow, half in the yellow spill of the corridor light. Not blocking the hall exactly, but close enough that I had to angle my shoulder around the corner to get to my lock. He didn't blink, not once, not even that little flutter people do when they're trying to remember something. Just a steady, flat look that held on like a sticker you can't peel off cleanly. I fumbled my key and made a joke, because that's what I do when I don't know what to do. "Hey," I said, shifting the bags. A can clinked against glass. "You're gonna dry your eyes out doing that." He didn't smile, but his mouth moved like he was considering it, a tiny adjustment at the corners. His pupils looked normal. His face looked normal. He had the kind of plain features you forget the moment you look away. Brown hair, no beard, a hoodie zipped up to his throat like it was cold in here. "Sorry," he said, and his voice was quiet, not creepy quiet, just like he didn't want to take up space. "Didn't mean to startle you." He was still not blinking. "Didn't startle me," I lied, because my keys were slipping, and the plastic handles of the grocery bags were biting deeper. And if I acknowledged the wrongness of it out loud, it would become a whole thing. "New here." He nodded once. His gaze didn't drift to my bags, didn't flick to the peephole camera above my door like most people's would. He kept looking at my face in a way that made me suddenly aware of my own eyes, how they blinked without permission. "Couple days," he said. "I'm Daniel." "Alex," I said, and then my lock finally turned. The door swung inward on its tired hinge with that familiar groan. My apartment smelled like the candle I'd left burning on the counter, cedar and smoke mixed with last night's takeout. It was comforting, embarrassingly so, like the place was glad I'd come back. I stepped inside, and because I'm not a monster, I held the door for him to pass, even though he wasn't walking anywhere. "Welcome to the glamorous life of Maple Street," I said. He paused as if he might answer, then said, "Thanks," and that was it. Still no blink. I let the door close and stood with my back pressed against it for a second, breathing through my nose, listening. The hallway had its usual noises. The elevator cable whining somewhere deep in the building, a neighbor's TV leaking muffled laughter, the soft thump of footsteps on the stairs. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that matched the weird little pinprick sensation behind my ribs. I set the bags down on the kitchen floor, rolled my shoulders to make the ache fade. My phone buzzed on the counter with a text. Mara, you alive? Or did you perish under the weight of organic kale? I snorted, grateful for the normalness of her tone. Me barely, send help. A second later, my screen lit up with her face in a video call. All blonde bun and mascara smudge. Her background the same brick wall she'd been painting white for a week in her condo on the other side of town. You look like you fought someone in the produce aisle, she said. Someone looked at me like they wanted my social security number, I replied, peeling the plastic handles off my fingers. New neighbor. Mara's eyebrows lifted. Cute new neighbor or murder new neighbor. That escalated. You're the one who moved into a building where the stairs creak like a horror soundtrack, she said, chewing on a pen cap. Tell me everything. I glanced toward my front door like Daniel could hear through it. The walls here were thin enough that I once heard a couple argue about a missing sock for 15 minutes. He doesn't blink, I said. Mara froze, pen cap halfway to her mouth. What do you mean, doesn't blink? I mean, I made eye contact long enough to unlock my door, and he didn't blink once. That's not possible. Okay, it's possible. It's just uncomfortable. She leaned closer to her camera, the phone catching the top edge of her kitchen light. Maybe he has contacts. Or, like, he's practicing for a starring contest. Or he's one of those people who thinks blinking is weakness. Mara, what? I'm trying to help. I'm not asking for help, I said, opening the fridge. The cold air brushed my face. I'm asking for you to validate that it's weird. It's weird, she said promptly, then softened. But not dangerous weird, probably. Probably, I echoed, and the word didn't sit right. My name is Alex Benton, and I'm the kind of person who can talk myself into and out of anything as long as I don't have to sit still with the feeling in my gut. I'm 32, and I moved to this neighborhood in Chicago because it was close enough to my job downtown and far enough from my ex's favorite bars that I wouldn't have to do that awkward dance of pretending not to see each other across a crowded room. It was supposed to be a reset. Smaller, quieter, unremarkable. I'd taken the lease in a hurry, signed forms on my phone in a rideshare, told myself that the building's scuffed hallway and unreliable buzzer were character. My private flaw, if you want to call it that, if you want to dress it up with a nicer word, is that I notice patterns, and then I can't stop noticing them. A sound in the wall becomes a list of possibilities. A neighbor's routine becomes a timeline. I've always been like that. As a kid, I used to count the seconds between my dad's footsteps and the front door opening so I could predict what kind of mood would walk in with him. It's exhausting. It's also how I keep myself feeling like I have some control. Mara was still watching me. She knows me well enough to read the little tells, my voice going too casual, my eyes cutting to the door. So, she said lightly, have you done your usual thing where you Google him and then feel guilty about it? I haven't Googled him, I said, because I hadn't. Yet. The building's radiator clicked as it warmed, a metallic pop that made me flinch anyway. I forced myself to keep moving, putting groceries away, lining cans in the cabinet. Normal tasks, safe tasks. My phone buzzed again. Not a text this time, but the building's group chat. Someone had made it on a free app after the mail theft started, and it was mostly used for passive-aggressive notes about recycling. Maple 12 tenants. Anyone else missing packages today? Saw a guy in a gray hoodie near the mailboxes around 4. I paused with a jar of pasta sauce in my hand. Gray hoodie. I heard Mara say, Alex. Nothing, I said too fast. Just building chat. What's up? I stared at the jar label, the tiny tomatoes printed on glass, and felt the air in the kitchen shift, not colder, not warmer, just different. Like when you realize you've been holding your breath without meaning to. I think my neighbor was wearing a gray hoodie, I said. Mara's eyes widened in that way she has when she's trying not to scare herself. Okay, lots of people own gray hoodies. Right, and you didn't actually see him near the mailboxes. No, then don't do that thing where your brain grabs a coincidence and builds a whole crime documentary. I wanted to laugh because she was right, and because the humor was the only way to keep my chest from tightening. Fine, I said, I won't. I carried my phone closer to the door, lowering my voice like the door could eavesdrop. But he really didn't blink, Mara. She made a face. Ask him if he needs eye drops. Great plan. Hi, Daniel. Welcome to Maple Street. Do you have a medical condition? Okay, don't do that, she admitted. Maybe just be polite. Observe, like a normal person. Observe, that was the problem. Observing is my specialty. After we hung up, I washed my hands and stood at the peephole without thinking, one palm on the cool metal of the deadbolt. I didn't open it. I just looked out. The hall was empty, but as I watched, a faint sound came from across the way. A soft scrape, like furniture shifting, followed by a brief, delicate tap, tap, tap that could have been someone setting something down carefully. Then, for a moment, the corridor light flickered just a stutter, a hiccup, and steadied again. The building was old. The wiring was old. Everything here had little problems that weren't emergencies until they suddenly were. I stepped back from the door, heart doing that annoying sprint it does for no reason. I told myself I was hungry. I was tired. I was primed to be weirded out because Mara had said the word murder. I walked to my couch, sat, and opened my laptop to distract myself. The screen glow washing my living room in pale light. My cursor hovered over the browser. I could type Daniel 3, B Maple 12, and see what came up: public records, social media, the same slippery slope everyone swears they don't go down. Or I could do the same thing and leave it alone. I heard another sound from the hall, closer this time, like a slow footstep that stopped right outside my door. Not a knock, not the rattle of keys, just someone standing there. I held my breath without meaning to, fingers poised above my keyboard, and I had a choice. Call out through the door like a normal neighbor, open it and be friendly, or stay quiet and pretend I wasn't home, letting the moment pass and letting the unanswered questions settle deeper. I didn't move. Not yet. The knock came again, sharper this time. The sound of knuckles on wood carrying through my apartment like a dropped plate. "Alex," a voice said, low but urgent. "Hey, it's Daniel. We need to talk." My first instinct, automatic, rehearsed, was to stay still. Let it pass. Let the hallway swallow the moment. That instinct had kept me safe more than once, or at least convinced me it had. But then the fire alarm went off. Not the full building siren. Just the shrill, localized scream from somewhere close. The kind that drills straight into your jaw and rattles your teeth. My smoke detector answered a second later, a thinner echo layered on top. I yanked the door open. Daniel stood there with a phone in his hand, the screen lighting his face from below. His eyes were wide, focused, still unblinking. "There's smoke," he said. "I think it's coming from the basement." The hallway smelled different now, sharp, electrical, like hot plastic. Under it, something darker. Burning dust. My pulse spiked, the familiar fizz under my skin that meant my brain was already running scenarios ahead of my body. "Did you call 911? I asked. "I'm trying," he said, holding up the phone. "No signal. Building Wi-Fi's down too." Right on cue, the hallway lights cut out. Not fully, just enough that the bulbs dropped to a dim orange emergency glow, shadows stretching and bending along the walls. Somewhere below us, a door slammed. Someone shouted, the words swallowed by the alarm. "This building," I muttered, grabbing my keys without thinking. "Alex," Daniel said, and for the first time, his gaze flicked, just briefly, to the stairwell door at the end of the hall. "We shouldn't go down there. People live down there," I said, even as my stomach twisted. Laundry room, storage cages, the gas meters. If there's a fire. "I know," he said. His voice stayed steady, but his fingers tightened around his phone. "But the alarm panel is in the basement. If it's a false alarm or an electrical thing, it might be tripping the detectors. A procedural failure," my brain supplied helpfully. "Old wiring. Overloaded circuit." The flicker earlier replayed in my mind like a bookmarked clip. From the stairs came the sound of coughing. A woman's voice, panicked. That decided it. We took the stairs 2 at a time, the concrete cool and damp under my palms as I skimmed the railing. The air thickened with each step down, my throat itching. My mind started counting without asking steps, breaths, exits. 1 flight. 2. On the landing between floors, we almost ran into Mrs. Kowalski from 2A, clutching her cardigan over her mouth, eyes watering. "Smoke," she wheezed. "It's getting worse." "Go up," I said, steering her past us. "Get outside." She nodded and moved, shoes scuffing, the alarm still screaming overhead. By the time we reached the basement door, the smell was undeniable. Acrid, hot. The metal handle was warm under my fingers. Daniel touched my arm. "Alex." I looked at him. Sweat beaded at his hairline. His pupils were blown wide in the low light. He still hadn't blinked. "If there's a gas leak," he started. "I know," I said, and pushed the door open anyway. The basement was chaos in miniature. Smoke curled near the ceiling, drifting in lazy gray ribbons. The fire alarm panel on the far wall flashed red, a stuttering heartbeat. Someone had left a laundry cart tipped on its side, clothes spilling like a body. The source was obvious once I saw it. An electrical outlet near the storage cages, blackened and sparking weakly. An extension cord melted into a glossy puddle on the floor. No open flame. Yet, a man I didn't recognize, early 20s, shaking hands, was standing there with a plastic bucket, sloshing water toward the outlet. "Stop," Daniel shouted. The water hit anyway. Sparks leapt. The lights flickered again, then died completely, plunging the room into emergency red. The alarm changed pitch, higher, angrier. "Jesus," I breathed. My chest felt tight, air shallow. Too many inputs. My flaw, right on cue. The need to catalog everything, to predict the outcome before it happened. "Circuit breaker," Daniel said. "We need to cut power." "Where?" I asked. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second. Then, storage room, back wall. "How do you know that?" Another hesitation. "I asked the super when I moved in." "Of course you did," my brain said, unhelpfully. We moved together, ducking low. My phone buzzed uselessly in my pocket, no service. The breaker box was behind a rusted cage door, padlocked. "Of course," I said. "Why wouldn't it be?" The young guy with the bucket backed away, eyes wild. "Is it gonna blow?" "Go upstairs," I said, "now." He ran. Daniel tested the padlock, then the hinge. "I can force it." "Can you?" I asked, and immediately hated the edge of my voice. He met my eyes. For a split second, finally, he blinked. "Yes," he said, and braced himself. Metal screeched as he wrenched the hinge, the sound setting my teeth on edge. The cage gave way with a clang, the padlock skittering across the floor. He reached inside and flipped breakers, one by one. The sparking outlet went dark. The alarm didn't stop. "Why isn't it stopping?" I said, panic sharpening my words. "If the power's off." "Battery backup," he said. "We need to reset the panel." A new sound cut through the din. Footsteps on the stairs, heavier this time. A man's voice barked orders. Someone else was crying. Then another problem announced itself, quieter but more dangerous. A hissing, like air leaking from a tire. Daniel's head snapped toward the gas meters along the wall. "Oh no," he said. My stomach dropped. Gas. The word tasted like pennies. "Everyone out," he shouted, louder than I'd heard him yet. The hissing grew louder. My phone buzzed again. Suddenly, a single bar of service flickering to life. A text from Mara popped up on my screen, absurdly normal. "Mara, fire trucks just passed my place headed your way. You okay?" Before I could answer, the basement door slammed shut above us. Not the soft swing of a door caught by a draft. A deliberate slam. The handle rattled. Daniel and I stared at the stairs. "Did someone?" I started. The hissing intensified. The alarm kept screaming. "We're locked in," Daniel said, and there was no room for doubt in his voice. Somewhere above us, footsteps retreated. My brain started counting again. Seconds, oxygen, exits. But the numbers slipped, wouldn't line up. My flaw turned on me, the pattern seeking spiraling into panic. Daniel grabbed my arm, grounding solid. "Alex, look at me." I did. His eyes were steady now, blinking normally, like nothing about him had ever been strange at all. There's a secondary exit, he said, through the storage cages, but it's tight, and we have maybe a minute before this gets bad. A minute, I echoed. The hissing rose to a shriek. Why would someone lock us in? I asked, the question tearing out of me. Daniel didn't answer. He just pulled me toward the dark, between the cages, where the air was thick and the path uncertain. Behind us, something sparked again, and above us, sirens wailed close enough to hear, too far to help. The storage cages formed a narrow maze, wire walls rattling as we shoved past, the emergency lights bleeding everything into shades of rust and shadow. My shoulder clipped metal and sent a sharp spark of pain down my arm. I hissed and kept moving. Left, Daniel said, then right. There's a service corridor. How sure are you? I asked, breath already turning shallow. Enough, he said, keep low. The hissing followed us, not louder exactly, but closer, like it had learned our pace and matched it. My chest burned. The air tasted wrong, metallic, and dry, and my tongue felt thick in my mouth. We reached the end of the cages and turned into a concrete corridor barely wide enough for two people. Exposed pipes ran along the ceiling, wrapped in yellowing insulation. A single emergency light flickered at the far end, buzzing like a trapped insect. Door should be at the end, Daniel said. Leads to the alley. Should, the word stuck with me. Halfway down the corridor, my foot slid. I windmilled, caught myself against the wall, and felt something wet soak into my palm. Careful, Daniel said, grabbing my elbow. I looked down. The floor was slick, with a dark puddle that reflected the red light. My brain jumped straight to the worst place. Is that, I started. Oil, Daniel said quickly, crouching. He rubbed his fingers together, sniffed, from the boiler. Old buildings leak. Relief came late and incomplete, my pulse still racing. A misfire, I told myself. Get a grip. We reached the end of the corridor and found the door. It was chained shut. The chain was thick, looped through the handle, and a wall-mounted eye bolt, secured with a heavy padlock that looked newer than anything else down here. You've got to be kidding me, I said. Daniel pulled once, hard. The chain held. He tried the padlock, then leaned his forehead briefly against the door, breathing through his nose. Okay, he said, okay. That's attempt 1, I said, my voice cracking despite my effort to keep it light. What's attempt 2? He looked around, eyes scanning, blinked again. Normal now, too normal. There's a vent, he said, back near the meters. It connects to the trash room. If we can pry it open. The hissing spiked, as if offended by the delay. We retraced our steps, slower now. My legs felt heavy, coordination slipping. Sweat soaked the collar of my shirt, chilled by the bad air. Somewhere above us, muffled through layers of concrete, a siren Dopplered past. Help's close, I said, mostly to myself. Close doesn't matter if we're sealed in, Daniel replied. At the gas meters, the sound was loud enough to vibrate my teeth. One of the pipes shuddered, a thin seam spraying invisible danger into the room. Daniel stripped off his hoodie and wrapped it around his hand, then reached for the valve. "Don't," I said, "if you spark." "I know," he said, "I know." He turned it slowly. The hissing dropped a notch. "Not gone. Better. That buys us time," he said. His face was pale now, sweat streaking through dust. The vent was a rectangular grate bolted into the wall, rusted screws biting deep. Daniel braced and pulled. The metal shrieked and bent, then popped free with a clang that echoed too loudly. Behind it, darkness and the sour stink of trash. "I'll go first," he said. "Of course you will," I muttered, but I didn't argue. He boosted himself up, shoulders scraping. The vent shaft was narrow, just wide enough to crawl. He disappeared feet first, shoes scuffing metal. "Okay," his voice came back, distorted. "It opens into the trash room. Door on the other side." "Is it locked?" I asked. A pause. "Yes." My laugh came out brittle. "You're killing me." "I can hear people," he added. "Muffled, they're close." That did something dangerous to my hope. I grabbed the edge of the vent and hauled myself up. My arms trembled. Halfway through, my foot slipped, and I banged my shin hard enough to see stars. I bit down on a yell, tasting blood. In the shaft, the air was worse, hotter, stagnant. I crawled, elbows screaming, my breath loud in my ears. At the end, Daniel dropped down into the trash room and reached up to help me. I fell the last foot awkwardly, ankle twisting. "Shit," I said, leaning on him. "Can you stand?" he asked. Define stand. The trash room was lit by a single bare bulb swinging gently, casting long shadows over dumpsters and bags piled too high. The door was metal, industrial, with a push bar on this side and a keypad on the other. Daniel tried the push bar anyway. Nothing. He turned to me. "You have your phone." I nodded, pulled it out with shaking hands. One bar of service flickered. "Call 911, he said. "Now." I did. The line rang once, twice, then connected. 911. "What's your emergency?" "We're trapped in the basement of Maple 12 on Maple Street," I said, words tumbling. "There's a gas leak. Someone locked the exits." "I have units on scene," the operator said. "Stay where you are. Help is coming." Relief crashed through me so hard my knees buckled. Daniel caught me, easing me down against a dumpster. Then the bulb above us popped. Darkness swallowed the room. The smell intensified. Somewhere nearby, something heavy shifted. "Daniel," I said. "I'm here," he said close. "Stay still." In the dark, a shape loomed tall, sudden. My heart slammed. Footsteps, breathing. "Hey," a voice shouted. "Who's in here?" A flashlight beam snapped on, blinding. "Maintenance," the man said, irritated, lowering the light. "Jesus, you scared me." "Building evacuation." The terror drained fast, leaving me shaky and furious. "Why was the door locked?" Daniel demanded. The man frowned. "Because procedure says secure trash room during gas events. Keeps people from panicking." "People are trapped," I said. He swore under his breath and fumbled with keys. The door swung open, fresh air rushing in like a physical thing. Sirens wailed just outside. As we moved toward the exit, my ankle gave out completely. Pain flared, hot and immediate. Daniel and the maintenance guy hauled me up between them. Outside, flashing lights painted the alley red and blue. Firefighters moved with purpose, masks on, hoses snaking. I thought it was over. Then one of the firefighters shouted, "Secondary valve, compromised. Pressure's building." The maintenance guy's face went white. "That's under the storage cages, under the path we'd taken." The building shuddered a deep, unsettling groan, and debris rained down behind us, sealing the vent entrance with a crash. Daniel looked back, then at me. "That was our last way out," he said quietly, and I realized, with a sinking certainty, that whatever had locked us in before hadn't needed to anymore. The firefighters moved fast, but not fast enough to make it feel safe. "Everyone back," one of them shouted, her voice clipped through the mask. "Gas levels are rising." Daniel tightened his grip under my arm as they ushered us toward the mouth of the alley. My ankle screamed with every step, a wet, nauseating pain that made my vision pulse. I could hear it now under the sirens, under the radios, the low, steady hiss from somewhere inside the building, like the place itself was breathing wrong. "Wait," Daniel said suddenly. The firefighter nearest us turned. "Sir, you need to keep moving." "The secondary valve," Daniel said, "under the storage cages. If pressure's building there, shutting the main won't be enough." She stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Because I asked," he said. "When I moved in, the super told me the basement was retrofitted in sections. The old line dead ends under the cages." The firefighter hesitated, then spoke into her radio, rapid and technical. Another voice crackled back, urgent. She swore, "He's right." My stomach dropped. I looked at Daniel, really looked at him. His face was drawn now, fear finally breaking through the composure. He met my eyes and didn't look away. "There's no access," she said. "That area's unstable." "There was a crawl gap," Daniel said. "Behind cage D it's tight." The firefighter shook her head. "We're not sending anyone in there." Daniel's jaw clenched. Then the building goes up. The alley fell into a strange pocket of quiet, like everyone was holding the same breath. I could hear my own pulse, loud and irregular. "I can show you," Daniel said. "I can get there." "Absolutely not," she said. "You're a civilian." "I live here," he snapped. "So does he." He nodded at me. I laughed, sharp and ugly. "I'm not going anywhere." Daniel turned to me. "Alex, I can't even walk," I said, "but I can crawl. And if this thing blows while we're standing out here arguing, that's it." The firefighter's eyes flicked between us. She made a decision, and I saw the weight of it settle on her shoulders. 2 minutes, she said, in and out. You follow my guy, you don't deviate. If anything shifts, you abort. Understood? Daniel nodded. I nodded, then immediately regretted it as pain shot through my ankle. They fitted us with masks, the rubber biting into my skin, the air inside stale and plasticky. We went back in through a side entrance the firefighters had forced open, the building groaning around us like it resented the intrusion. The basement looked worse now. Smoke hung thicker, swirling low. The emergency lights flickered, then steadied, casting everything in a sickly red. Debris littered the floor, chunks of concrete, twisted wire. Cage D, the firefighter said, pointing. We moved, slow, careful. Every sound felt amplified. My ragged breathing, the crunch of grit under boots, the distant, relentless hiss. Behind the cages, there it was, a narrow gap where the wall didn't quite meet the floor, hidden by shelving, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The firefighter crouched, shining his light. I'll go. The floor shifted under him as he did. A soft, ominous crack. Stop, Daniel said. Too late. The shelving shuddered, then collapsed inward with a metallic scream, blocking the gap in a tangle of wire and rusted steel. The firefighter cursed, "Exit now." The hissing spiked, high and violent. Something banged deep in the walls, like a fist pounding from the inside. There's another way, Daniel said. The meter crawl. It loops. The firefighter stared at him. That route was sealed. Not completely, Daniel said. I checked. You checked, I said, breathless. The words weren't accusation, just realization. He glanced at me, blinked. I like to know my exits. The building lurched. Dust rained down. Somewhere above us, glass shattered. The firefighter made a call. You have 30 seconds, she said. That's it. We didn't argue. The crawl space was worse than I remembered, lower, tighter, the air hot and thin. I went first because my ankle wouldn't bear weight anyway. I dragged myself forward on my elbows, the concrete scraping skin raw. Panic clawed at my throat as the space narrowed, the ceiling pressing close enough that I could feel it with every breath. Behind me, Daniel kept pace, his breathing steady in my ear. Don't stop, he said. You're doing good. I wanted to laugh at that. I wanted to scream. The hiss was deafening now. I could feel it in my bones. Ahead, a faint glint metal. The old valve, crusted with corrosion, the handle half melted. There, I said, voice shaking. Daniel surged past me despite the space, wedging himself in front of the valve. He wrapped his hoodie, still looped around his arm, over his hand, and grabbed the handle. On 3, he said. If it sticks, we force it together. 1, I said. The building groaned again, louder this time. A deep, structural sound that made my stomach flip. 2, I thought absurdly of my dad's footsteps, of counting, of thinking you could predict the worst if you were just vigilant enough. 3, we pulled. The valve screamed in protest, metal shrieking against metal. Daniel grunted, muscles straining. My shoulder flared with pain as I added what little leverage I could. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the handle moved. The hiss dropped to a whisper, then to silence. The quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was stunned. Go, Daniel said, already backing up. Now. We crawled, scrambled. The crawl space behind us shuddered, then partially collapsed, sealing itself with a final, decisive crash. Firefighters dragged us the rest of the way, hands firm, practiced. Fresh air hit me like a slap. I ripped the mask off and gagged, lungs burning. Outside, the building stood wounded, but intact, smoke bleeding from its lower vents. Firefighters swarmed, controlled, methodical. I lay on the cold pavement, staring up at the night sky, lights blurring. Daniel sat beside me, his hoodie shredded, his hands shaking now that there was nothing left to do. Sirens faded to a background hum. "You could have died," I said finally. He nodded. "So could you." I turned my head, ankle throbbing, skin scraped and bruised, the cost settling into me. "You knew the building too well," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. I had a reason. I waited, but he didn't elaborate. His eyes flicked back to the building, to the darkened windows. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked tired, worn down, human in a way that scared me more than the unblinking ever had. The danger was over. The feeling was. They took me to Northwestern in an ambulance that smelled like disinfectant and rubber gloves, the siren off, lights still on out of habit. My ankle wasn't broken, bad sprain, possible ligament tear. But it ballooned anyway, purple and yellow blooming under the skin like a time-lapse bruise. They wrapped it, iced it, gave me crutches and a paper cup of pills that tasted chalky and left my mouth dry. I kept asking the same questions, circling them like loose teeth. Did anyone get hurt? How bad was the building? Was it safe to go back? A nurse with a tired smile told me the answers gently, as if volume mattered. No fatalities. A couple of people treated for smoke inhalation. The building would be closed for inspections for a few days. Structural engineers, gas company, city permits. All the words that make danger feel bureaucratic. Daniel wasn't in the room when I woke from a doze. He hadn't ridden with me. A firefighter told me he'd refused transport, sat on the curb with his head in his hands until someone handed him water. I pictured him there, hoodie shredded, blinking normally now, and felt something complicated loosen in my chest. Mara showed up just after midnight, hair still in a bun, jacket thrown over paint-splattered jeans. She hugged me carefully, then immediately scolded me for being reckless and brave in the same breath. "You're not allowed to do that again," she said, gesturing vaguely at my leg. The hospital, the idea of heroics. Whatever that was. "I didn't plan it," I said. She snorted. "No one ever does." She drove me to her place because the building was sealed and because I didn't want to sleep alone. On the way, the city looked exactly like it always did, late-night buses sighing at stops, a couple arguing on a corner, a man walking a dog too small for the cold. Ordinary life resumed with impressive speed. In the morning, a city inspector called to take my statement. He asked about the alarms, the chain on the alley door, the timing. He wrote everything down in a neat hand and nodded in the right places. When I mentioned Daniel's knowledge of the building, the inspector's pen paused. "Did he work here?" he asked. "I don't think so," I said. "He said he talked to the super." The inspector nodded again, neutral. "We'll follow up." They followed up with everyone. The maintenance worker explained procedures. The super explained shortcuts taken years ago, lines rerouted, paperwork lost. The chained door was traced to a previous theft incident. Someone had added the padlock, temporarily, and never removed it. No one admitted to locking the basement during the alarm, but no one could prove they hadn't. The official conclusion arrived by email 2 days later, a PDF with the city seal at the top. An overloaded extension cord caused the initial electrical failure. Heat damaged a nearby gas line already weakened by corrosion. Contributing factors included outdated infrastructure and improper emergency access control. Human error, plural. I read it twice and felt both satisfied and cheated. Daniel texted once, "You okay?" Just that. I stared at the screen longer than necessary before replying. "Healing. You." "Same," he wrote. "Listen, can we talk?" We met a week later at a coffee shop on Damon, neutral territory. He arrived early and stood when he saw me, instinctive politeness. He blinked. A lot. Too much, maybe. Or maybe that was just me counting again. "I'm sorry," he said before I could speak, "for putting you in that position." I shook my head. "You saved the building." He winced. "It shouldn't have been on us." There was a pause, filled by the hiss of the espresso machine and the low murmur of other people's conversations. I noticed small things. The way he held his cup with both hands, knuckles pale. A faint scar along his forearm I hadn't seen before. "You said you had a reason," I said finally, "for knowing the exits." He nodded, eyes dropping to the table. "My sister died in a fire," he said. "Apartment building, 10 years ago. Locked stairwell. Alarms that didn't work." The words sat between us, heavy and simple. "I'm sorry," I said. "So am I," he said. "I promised myself I'd never be trapped like that again. I ask questions. I map places. I know it looks strange." I thought of my own habit, my counting, my need to anticipate. 2 different scars, same shape. "People cope how they cope," I said. He looked up then, searching my face. "You don't think I?" "No," I said, quick and honest. "I don't." We talked about small things after that. Logistics, the building repairs, where he might stay in the meantime. When we stood to leave, he hesitated. "I'm moving," he said, "once the lease thing clears." "Oh," I said, surprised by the sting. "Okay." He nodded. "I think it's better." I didn't disagree. When the building reopened, it smelled like fresh paint and bleach. New exit signs glowed an almost aggressive green. The alley door was unlocked, the chain gone. The city posted a notice by the mailboxes listing improvements in bullet points. Life slotted back into place, imperfectly. I learned how to use crutches without bruising my palms. I slept through the night most nights. Sometimes, when the radiator clicked, my heart jumped anyway. Daniel's apartment across the hall stayed dark. A for rent sign went up, white and hopeful. Weeks later, a package went missing. Just one. A neighbor complained in the group chat, mild annoyance, not panic. Someone suggested cameras. Someone else made a joke. I stood in the hallway one evening, keys in hand, and looked at the door across from mine. The peephole stared back, blank and unblinking. I unlocked my door and went inside. The candle on the counter smelled like cedar and smoke, comforting, familiar. As I closed the door, I noticed something on the floor of the hall, half hidden by the baseboard. A small piece of black plastic, melted at one end, like it had once been part of something larger. An extension cord end, maybe, or nothing. I nudged it with my shoe, then left it there. Some questions don't need answers to keep you awake. They just need a place to sit. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you.